Flirty messages, a royal name, a courtroom, and texts that no one was ever supposed to see. According to reports, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex himself, sent some eyebrow-raising Facebook messages to a journalist that allegedly prove he knew exactly who she was. So why did he claim otherwise in court? Stay with me because this one gets complicated in the best possible way. Let me set the scene first. Back in October 2022, Prince Harry filed a lawsuit against Associated Newspapers, the publishing company behind the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. He alleged that they obtained private information about him through what he described as phone hacking, wiretapping, and other illicit practices spanning nearly 2 decades, from 1993 to 2011. That is a long window of time. And Harry's argument was essentially, there is no legitimate way you could have known what you knew. The information was private, the methods were illegal. End of story. Now, Associated Newspapers pushed back hard. They denied every single allegation. Instead, their defense leaned on something far more relatable: sources. Specifically, they claimed they had people inside Harry's social circle who were willingly sharing information. And at the center of that claim stood one particular name: Charlotte Griffiths. She is now the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, but back in the early 2010s, she was the former deputy diary editor, and according to reports, she was also someone who moved in the same social circles as Prince Harry himself. Now here is where it starts getting interesting, and I want you to pay attention here. Harry, in his legal argument, reportedly claimed he did not know Charlotte Griffiths was a journalist. That was part of his position, that he was not aware of her professional identity. Sounds reasonable, right? Maybe they just crossed paths at parties. Maybe he had no idea. Except, Charlotte Griffiths had a very different account. She submitted a witness statement saying, and I am paraphrasing carefully because this matters, her friends, including the group that introduced her to Prince Harry, knew she was a journalist and had gone to work for Katie Nicholl at the Mail on Sunday. In other words, the people who brought him into that social group already knew what she did for a living. That is a significant detail, and the defense was not going to let it go quietly. But here is the thing that absolutely nobody was expecting, or at least nobody was talking about until this week: Facebook messages. Old ones, between Harry and Charlotte Griffiths, exchanged between December 2011 and January 2012. These surfaced during the closing hearing of the lawsuit, and according to reports from Newsweek and The Telegraph, what they revealed was not just a friendly acquaintance. These messages were flirty, very flirty, like movie snuggles flirty. I am not making that up. That phrase is going to come back around in a moment, and I need you to be ready for it. Let me walk you through the messages. On December 4th, 2011, Harry reportedly sent the opening message, and it's already giving you a clear picture of the energy here. He wrote, and I quote what was reported, "It's H in case you were confused by name and picture, XXX. That is a man who is very aware that the person receiving this message absolutely knows who he is and is playing into it. Charlotte responded with warmth and full-on banter. She called him Mr. Mischief, her word, not mine, and reminisced about a fun country weekend, ending her message with smooches, CG string, XXX. I would just like to point out that grown adults sending each other Facebook messages with XXX and smooches are not strangers exchanging pleasantries. That is a particular kind of friendship, or something adjacent to it. Harry wrote back that it was, and sources quote, "without doubt the best of those weekends I've been to," adding he had never laughed so much in 24 hours. He kept the tone warm, complained about having to make polite conversation with strange people at a dinner to raise money for charity, something he clearly did not enjoy, and asked Charlotte how work was going. Here is the small but crucial detail the defense was not going to overlook. He mentioned her work. He asked about her job, not in a way that suggests confusion about what her job was. He asked how it was going. Now, you might think, okay, they exchanged a few friendly texts, big deal. But the story does not end there. The two did not message again until January 22nd, a full month later, and that's where things escalate considerably. Charlotte opened the conversation by calling him H-Bomb, which I personally think is one of the better royal nicknames in documented history, and told him how much he had been missed at a gathering the previous week. Harry's response, according to reports, is what has everyone talking. He reportedly wrote, and these are the words that sources have confirmed were presented in court, "I wish I was there, sugar, but unfortunately stuck in Cornwall doing army stuff. Otherwise, I would have been there playing and then drinking you under the table, obvi. Just wish I could have been there, especially now that you are there. Do you ever work?
Hope you're really well, Griff. Miss our movie snuggles. I'm off comms all week in case you think I'm being rude. Keep me posted. XXX. Miss our movie snuggles. 3 XXXs. Sugar. I want to be very clear that I am not here to judge anybody's personal life. What two adults do in their own time is entirely their business. What makes this legally relevant, and this is the part that actually matters for the case, is what these messages suggest about Harry's awareness of who Charlotte Griffiths was. If you are messaging someone you claim not to know is a journalist with that level of familiarity, it raises some serious questions. In fact, it arguably dismantles a key pillar of his argument, that the information Associated Newspapers published could not have come from anyone legitimately inside his circle, because he did not knowingly had friends who were journalists. Now, I do want to offer some important context here, because responsible reporting demands it. These messages took place after Harry's relationship with Chelsea Davy, which concluded around April 2011, and before he began dating Cressida Bonus, which reportedly started around May 2012. So chronologically, this is a window, December 2011 to January 2012, when Harry was single. There is nothing here that suggests any romantic betrayal or overlap with another relationship. And whatever the nature of the friendship between Harry and Charlotte, it is not the morality of it that is on trial. It is the question of whether Harry knew she was a journalist, and whether that awareness has any bearing on the credibility of his broader privacy allegations. That is a genuinely complicated legal question, and honestly, the judge is the only person can answer it. From a strictly legal standpoint, knowing someone is a journalist doesn't automatically mean you consented to your private life being reported on. That is a nuance that Harry's legal team would certainly argue. But from a credibility standpoint, if Harry stated he did not know Charlotte Griffiths was a journalist, and the defense can show these messages alongside testimony that her journalism career was common knowledge in that social group, that could be damaging to his case. How damaging is something only the verdict will tell us. Here is my honest take, and I want to be upfront that this is personal analysis, not fact. These messages alone are unlikely to be the deciding factor in a case this complex. Privacy law is not a simple equation. The central allegation that Associated Newspapers used illegal methods to obtain information does not necessarily collapse because Harry knew one person in his circle worked for a tabloid. The question of whether those illegal methods were used still needs to be answered. But these messages do complicate the narrative that Harry has carefully constructed publicly, that of a man who was constantly surveilled and exploited without his knowledge or consent. When evidence emerges suggesting close, warm personal contact with someone who was actively working in tabloid media during the very period in question, the picture becomes less clear-cut, and that ambiguity matters, both in court and in the court of public opinion. Now, I also want to zoom out for a second because there's something bigger happening here. This trial is not happening in isolation. Prince Harry has been, by his own description, at war with the British tabloid press for years. He has spoken about it in his memoir, in his Netflix documentary, in virtually every public interview since he stepped back from royal duties. The press, in his telling, is not just intrusive, it is the villain of his story. So a trial where he is taking on Associated Newspapers directly is a deeply personal one. It is not just about damages or legal remedies. It's about vindication. It's about being believed. And that is exactly why these messages matter more than their content might suggest on the surface. If the judge finds that Harry's account has inconsistencies, not necessarily that he lied, but that his characterization of his relationship with the press is more complicated than he has presented, that affects the credibility of his entire campaign against tabloid media. It doesn't mean the underlying allegations are false. It doesn't mean phone hacking didn't happen, but it changes the story. The closing hearing in the lawsuit between Harry and Associated Newspapers reportedly concluded this past Tuesday. As of the time this script was written, the judge had not announced a verdict. According to sources, including Newsweek, it could take weeks or even months before a decision is reached, which means we're in a waiting period. And in my experience, waiting periods in legal cases involving royals and tabloids tend to be very eventful in other ways. Expect more documents to surface. Expect more context to emerge. Expect everyone with an opinion, and there are millions of them, to weigh in loudly. What I will say is this: whatever you think of Harry Prince, whatever you read on the British royal family, or on tabloid journalism, or the broader cultural debate that has followed him since 2020, this trial is raising questions worth taking seriously. The ethics of tabloid journalism, the boundaries of privacy law, the right of any public figure, royal or otherwise, to control their own narrative. Those are not small questions. They deserve more than a headline. They deserve exactly the kind of close reading that these Facebook messages, unlikely as it sounds, are now demanding. Stay tuned, because wherever this verdict lands, it's going to land loudly.